This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Well, as I've said before, there is something to these made-for-TV movies about serial killers. They might actually be the best ones made of that serial killer. Even in a slew of films based on the same one, I think these made-for-TV movies might be the best ones. Whether they're the first films based on that killer or not, from what I've seen, they are the best. So my last review was The Hunt for the BTK Killer, which I don't think was the first movie based on BTK, but it is certainly the best so far that I've seen. Not that I had a whole lot of competition. But this is another TV movie, and this is the first film based on this serial killer. Yes, I am continuing my marathon / run through of films based on real life serial killers. But this real life person has had a number of films based on him in different aspects of his life and crimes. But this was the very first one, and the only film to be released during his lifetime before his execution. And that is Ted Bundy, and it is the 1986 made-for-TV movie, The Deliberate Stranger, which this is another one that I had not seen prior to this review. It is a little over 3 hours. It's 188 minutes. It's a two-part film, which, is still 2 DVDs, so I did have to switch it over. But I've always heard, prior to seeing this, that this has always been the Bundy movie to see. That this is the most accurate, that Mark Harmon, who people might know from NCIS, gives the best Bundy performance. And I have to agree. This is the best. It does touch on the most of all the events involving the case. Obviously, it doesn't touch upon everything, but it touches on more so than others. And I will say Mark Harmon probably is the best Bundy. Now, it does take a similar approach to Extremely Wicked with Zac Efron, which I do not have. It's on its way. I ordered it off eBay. Had to come from overseas because there's no DVD release. But I have reviewed it already, so you can check out my review for that. Which, Efron was really good at showing the charm of Bundy, as does Mark Harmon. But I feel like there's a bit more... There's something to Harmon that I don't think Efron had, which is, really good at playing off, hey, I might be innocent. How could a good-looking, well-to-do law student like me do all these things? I think Harmon played that a bit more than Efron. But it does take a similar approach, whereas it doesn't really show Bundy committing his crimes. It more alludes to it. Now, Extremely Wicked kind of plays off the idea of what if he is innocent. It's all from the perspective of his girlfriend, Liz Kendall, and the people at the trial and those that watched it on TV, did what the public saw. So we don't get to see him commit any murders. Here it alludes to it, like it'll show him talking to a woman, then they'll walk off, and then we'll hear, like on a radio or TV, young girl goes missing. Up until a certain point, and then we see it. And it's very well done how they do it. It's kind of the Silence of the Lambs effect, where we see Anthony Hopkins as Lecter, super calm and cool, so that when he finally escapes and he unleashes the monster, it's that much more effective. It does have a scene like that, so the way it doesn't show him committing his crimes, or it reveals a little bit more each time, I think is very effective. Again, this is one of those movies that will separate the true crime enthusiasts and just the surface level people that pretty much just want to see a slasher film. They just want to see how fucked up a serial killer is. They don't care about the facts or the actual story. They just want to see Bundy doing what Bundy is known for. So this is another one of those films made for true crime enthusiasts. Now, So it aired in 1986. Of course, Bundy was still alive. He executed January 24th of 89. It aired May 4th and 5th of 86. Bundy was, I think, offered or was able to see it, but he declined. So he did not see it. It is based on the book The Deliberate Stranger by Richard Larson. He does have a character in this. That is a book I do not have, but I would like to read it after watching this. Directed by Marvin J. Chomsky, and it stars Mark Harmon as Bundy, Frederick Forrest as Detective Keppel, who would have a long relationship with Bundy. In fact, I believe it's one of these two films that I haven't seen yet. Must be the Riverman. Yeah, must be. Who interviewed Bundy a number of times in prison and worked the Bundy case out of Seattle. George Grizzard, Maggie Roswell, and like a number of these killer films, a lot of the names are changed. For example, Emmett Walsh, great character actor. I mean, Blood Simple. He was in an episode of Tales from the Crypt, the one with the taxidermy pets and everything. He plays a guy named Detective Sam Davies, who he's actually based on the character. If I can pull up my notes, because trust me, in 3 hours there's a lot going on in this film. Bob Mackey, and it does show him taking a leave from the case due to health issues, but still being prominent. The name of his girlfriend, Liz Kendall, has been changed to Cass or Cassie. Her daughter, Molly, the name's been changed to Jenny, which Cass is played by Glynis O'Connor, who kind of reminds me of Jamie Lee Curtis. His mother, Louise, played by Bonnie Bartlett. The character Martha Chambers, played by Deborah Goodrich, is loosely based off of Carol Ann Boone, who was another part-time girlfriend of Bundy's that he actually proposed to during his trial on TV, and then had his daughter in 1982. I believe it was 82. And then there's the character of Miss Richer, who is loosely based off of Anne Rule, the author of Stranger Beside Me, which this is known as the most comprehensive book on Bundy. She's one of the biggest true crime writers that there is. She worked with Bundy in the Crisis Center, which the film does show, but it shows him a bit more romantic. She's only in a couple scenes, and in real life, she supported him up until the Florida trials. Then she realized what he was. But it does show the Martha character, the Carol Ann Boone, moving to Florida to be closer to him. It also fictionalizes the way how Rule and Boone hanging out, being friends when they were never really close in real life. Apparently, Harmon wanted to meet Bundy after getting the role, but the director advised him against it. And apparently, Robert Hayes was the first actor approached to play Bundy, but he said it went against his morals, and out of respect for the victims' families, he chose not to. It does have a cold open. Cold open of, a silhouette going down an alley, then attacking this young woman. That is Bundy's sixth murder of George Ann Hawkins, which in the film she's referred to as Ann Pitney. And then it cuts to detectives mentioning 5 other girls, all of which have different names. All the names are different. Some of them are even switched, which again really isn't an issue. It's more of a respect thing than just an inaccuracy thing. So, but and that's the thing with this film is that event-wise and as far as the things that happen did happen in real life. Maybe the names are changed, or maybe the dates are a little bit off, or some of the things surrounding the events are slightly changed. Like Bundy's first escape, it does show it, but instead of him going to the court library and jumping out of the second story window, he goes to the county clerk's office and jumps out of a first story window. Instead of a brown cardigan, he's wearing a red one. But the point is, he jumped out of a window and escaped. So the events and the amount of events are stunningly accurate, which actually the term stunningly accurate, I think was used by Anne Rule herself. Excuse me. If I could find the quote, which I can't. It was either Anne Rule or someone else said that the movie was stunningly accurate. Even though Rule thought that Harmon didn't show the insecurities of Bundy hiding behind his mask of confidence, which is true. There's a lot of focus and mention on Bundy and how he carries himself like he's king of the world and full of confidence. Like, you know, he's got life by the balls. When it doesn't show any of the insecurities that he had in real life. So, like a number of Bundy movies, the performance might be kind of one note, which, I mean, you know, like this one, this was pretty much a slasher film. This one I've reviewed. The one with Cora Nemec is on the way. That's another one that's kind of a slasher film. This one is actually based on The Stranger Beside Me, which I have not seen this one yet. It's another one that I have to do. And then there's other ones like The Riverman, which is about him and Keppel as he gives his insight on how to catch the Green River Killer, which would inspire Silence of the Lambs. No Man of God, which is shortly before his execution, when he sits with analyst Bill Hagmaier to pretty much talk about the grisly details of his crimes. I haven't seen that one either, but I've seen a number of documentaries, and, you know, as I've shown before, you know, got a ton of material on him, like The Stranger Beside Me. The book version of Conversations with the Killer, which I wish Netflix would not be so stingy and release a DVD of this. Encyclopedia of the Ted Bundy murders. This is very handy. Just a regular book by him. And then I have about 24 encyclopedic books like this with Bundy. I just pulled this one because he's on the cover, which I believe this was shortly after his February 1979 arrest in Florida. So, really, I'm not going to go through sort of the clip notes of the real-life Ted Bundy because I did it for the 2002 film. But he was known to kill at least 30 that he confessed to. Women between 1974 and 1978 across 7 states. Was able to use his handsome looks, his intellect, and his good boy, squeaky clean image and record to just skate by and not arouse any suspicion. His favorite tactic was to use, you know, a fake cast and an arm sling, ask women for help. That's how he got many of his victims. If you want to know more, you can go back to my review for this, where I talk a little bit more about the real-life Bundy. But I did make a series of notes comparing the events that this film shows and the real-life version of it. So, yeah. Well, apparently, before I get into it, Larson, who wrote the book The Deliberate Stranger, he says he covered politics for Times, and he interviewed Bundy in 1972 before he ever committed a murder that we know of. and he was working as a volunteer for the re-election campaign of Governor Daniel J. Evans. And then Larson covered the Ted murders in 1974. Apparently the book has since gone out of print after the edition of 1990 was put out, so might be kind of pricey online, but I guess I'll see. Now, there was a few differences that I noticed on IMDb. Basically, a lot of actors that would appear in other films, like the detective from Utah, he was the cop in Wayne's World. The officer that pulls him over in Colorado after his first escape, she was in Saturday Night Deadly Night. She was in Halloween 4. She's the one that gets the thumb in the forehead. A number of people went to be in Halloween 4, actually. The boyfriend of one of the Lake Sammamish girls was played by a young Timothy Gibbs, who was, for Max Payne fans, he was the model for the game Max Payne 2 and 3. Oh, the one I didn't put is the character of Susan Delgado. That's Carol Durant, the woman that escaped from a botched abduction, fingered him in a lineup, and that's really what sent everything up into motion. I think that was the only thing I didn't get in my notes, because I kept missing her name. But anyway, so... Oh, and Anne Rule said something about how Bundy got more love letters after the premiere of this film, but she thinks that women were writing to Mark Harmon, like in their mind, that's who they think. Like, that's who they were thinking of when they wrote Bundy, not the real life one. But anyway, so now I'll go to my notes. So, after it shows that cold open of the George Ann Hawkins murder, and again, up until the murder at the ski resort in 1975, it doesn't really show anything. It will show a woman, him either approaching a woman or one walking away with him or getting in his car, driving away, fade to black, and then we hear later that she's gone missing. And then, the ski resort, we see a little bit more, and then, we see the Carol Durant abduction, and then when it gets to Chi Omega, that's when we see the Beast unleashed. That's the Hannibal Lecter Monster Unleashed escape scene for this film. And again, the way it does that, it works as build-up. One, it is more respectful, I think, to the victims and families, because this treats the victims pretty much like slasher victims. Whereas in here, it doesn't show them. It also does a good job at showing the aftermath and how the families are affected. Because when the remains of the two Sammamish girls, or at least their skulls, were found near the Taylor Mountain in Washington, they approached the mother of one of them and say, hey, I'm sorry, we found her, she's not missing, she's dead. She says, well, she's Catholic, so we're a Catholic, I would like to have a funeral. And they say, well, I'm sorry, but we can't forfeit her remains in case there's a break in the case or we need DNA, which is something you might not think about. Like, the murder victims, if the killer's still on the loose, they got to keep the body, especially back then when DNA was not as readily available or stored like it is now. The mother just showing that anguish, like, it does do a good job at showing what the loved ones go through of victims, which you don't always get in these kinds of films. So, of course, Bundy's first 5 victims were Linda Ann Healy, Donna Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, Brenda Ball, and Georgia Ann Hawkins. Of course, she's not mentioned at this point. But they mentioned Mary Alice Cooper, Susan Armsby, Shirley Lane, Diane Woodrow, Paula Bernardi, and Ann Pickney. And then it pretty much goes right into Lake Sammamish. Like, that's kind of one of the opening scenes where, Bundy, which was on July 14th of 74, he was wearing tennis clothes and a cast. It said he approached 5 other women. They all turned him down. It does show one. It shows one kind of being like, "No, I'm sorry," because she thinks it's weird that there's no boat attached to the car. She's not leaving with him. But it shows him meeting the 2 other women at 2 separate times, which I think Bundy said they were about 4 hours apart. Here it makes it look like one after another. And in real life, the girls' names were Janice Ott and Denise Naslin, which I believe, the way I caught it, they changed them to Janice Naslin and Denise Maxwell. So, kind of switched the names around. And one of them was taken from the restroom. We actually see her go in the restroom, then fade to black. Which, another thing, and I noticed this with the Hunt for the BTK Killer as well. This and that one feel less like TV movies than some of the 2000s, like direct-to-video ones, like Dahmer, Gein, Gacy. They feel more like TV movies than this and Hunt for the BTK Killer. Like, they're that well made. I mentioned how Liz's name was changed to Cass or Cassie. She doesn't have that big of a role. It does show. Well, I'll get to that. It does. Oh, it shows him working at the crisis center, being really close with this woman named Barbara, loosely based on Anne Rule. Sort of having a relationship with this woman named Martha, loosely based on Carol Ann Boone. It does show Liz finding a package of plaster of Paris in his bathroom, which did happen. Once the sketch and name of Ted from Lake Sammamish comes out on the news, she thinks it might be him. And in real life, she did call, make an anonymous tip, like, "Hey, my boyfriend Ted drives a Volkswagen Beetle." Whereas in this, when she calls, she inquires about the plaster of Paris. Where in real life, she called about the color of the Beetle in order for her own peace of mind. It shows that on September 6, 1974, and most of the dates that they actually put are right. If they're off, it's just by like a day or two. So, and, that's probably always going to happen. But September 6th was the first major break, because we keep cutting back to Detective Keppel, his partner, and the Sam Davies, based on Bob Mackey, looking into this Ted case and all the dead ends they keep running into. But on September 6th of 74, they find the skeletal remains of Issaquah, the skull and the mandible of the 2 Sammamish girls. And it said September 6th, but it was actually September 8th. So, yeah, like I said, it might have been a day or two off. It does show that he went to Utah for law school. When he gets there, it shows his victim of, I'm not sure how he actually met her, but he followed her later from a Halloween party, and this girl was young. She was actually in high school. One of his few high school victims. This damn thing, if it would just stop. In the film, her name was Katie, but in real life, they never said it. or if they did, I totally missed it. I know which one they were talking about though. And then it shows that on November 8th, it was the Carol DeRanche botched abduction, which is pretty much the same. Saying, impersonating an officer, hey, your car's been broken into, and saying, oh, your car's fine. Well, you still got to do a statement. You got to come with me. Now, in the 2002 film, she seemed skeptical from the beginning. This was closer to real life, where she questioned him at first. He flashed her a badge, and then she kind of felt silly anytime she questioned him. But this is when we see, this is when we see him actually doing something. Like, he takes out the cuffs, tries to cuff her, she fights back, is able to get away to a car. And then the first time we actually see him doing something with the victim is on January 12th of 75, when at the Wildwood Inn in Colorado, where he killed Karen Campbell, which she's called Lynn or Jolynn Baker. Which I don't know if she had a husband or boyfriend in real life, but it does show him approaching her in the hallway of the resort, which did happen. And then we get this cool wide shot of him carrying her through the snow. So that's sort of the first bit we see of him actually with a victim going to a site. So it's always been fade to black or cut away. Then with the Carol DeRanche scene, we do see an attack. Now we actually see him with the dead or stunned body. And then we see, it said March 1st of 75, 4 out of the first 5, remains of the first 4 out of the 5 victims were found by the Taylor Mountain Park, and that's when part 1 ends, because that's the first major break. That's when they realize we have one killer. And this is where he's been bringing them all. Which, I did put the names. The skulls of Susan Rancourt and Roberta Parks. I already said what their names were changed to. Then it cuts to his first arrest in August 16th of 75 in Granger, Utah, which he was swerving, led into a chase. Cop pulls him over and searches his car, finds his rape kit, with the ski mask, nylon stocking mask, crowbar with duct tape handle, and he's arrested. Now in the film, he's not driving or swerving, he's just seen sitting suspiciously in front of a house, but he's still arrested. In the film, his parents post bail so he can get out. In real life, the evidence was seen as circumstantial, and he was let go. But then we get the Carol DeRanche lineup. Which some films show this kind of randomly, but this is the closest I've seen the lineup. Maybe, I don't remember exactly how it was in Extremely Wicked. I would say this is tied for its accuracy as Extremely Wicked. It has more events in it, definitely. But Extremely Wicked was done in a more show-offy way, kind of like a Disaster Artist, where it's like recreating pre-existing footage. Even at the end, putting the footage side by side as if to say, see how close we made it? Whereas this is making a movie, it's not recreating existing shots or footage, but Bundy was number 7 in the lineup, next to last one to the right, shown in a white turtleneck, which was the same in real life. Carol DeRanche, her name was different in this, as I said. She points him out, and then it shows that was October 2nd of 75, and then in February 76, he got his first sentence, 1 to 15 years in Utah for the attempted murder and kidnapping of Carol DeRanche, which is true. But then on July 31st of 77, he was charged with the murder of the woman, uh, Carolyn Campbell, in Colorado at the ski inn. So he was transferred to Colorado. But that was when, oh, this goddamn thing. And I think they said that it was gas receipts that put him in Colorado at that time, and that's what they use as evidence. I believe that to be true. And so this is kind of where the film picks up, and it gets more faster paced, more things happening sooner together. Because after he's sentenced and transferred to Colorado, it shows June. It shows his first escape, which in real life it was June 7th of 77. He was acting as his own attorney, so he had no shackles, civilian clothes. He was allowed to go to the courthouse library to go over his stuff, and he jumped out of the second-story window, ran off into the mountains, and survived for 6 days. And then he was then found in a stolen car, swerving. He was pulled over. Cops knew who he was, and he was arrested. In this, though, it's depicted as wintertime. And as I've said, he goes to the county clerk's office, jumps out of a one-story window, wearing the red sweater instead of the brown. It shows him stealing a car, and then speeding and getting pulled over, seemingly the same night. So that's kind of shortened, altered a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's still the same thing. It was a preliminary hearing, jumped out of a window in the courthouse, had a successful escape, just not as long as it was in real life. And it does mention at this time how that was really foolish, because the evidence stacked against him was, one, starting to deteriorate, the stuff out in the wild, but then the stuff they actually had on him was being seen as inadmissible. Worst case scenario, he gets a year and a half for the Carol DeRanche crime. I was going to say attack, but for Carol DeRanche, but for Bundy, he just couldn't do it, so that's why he escaped. Then it shows his second escape, which this is altered slightly as well, which it was December 30th of 77, which he did use a saw to cut the seam in the ceiling of a air duct gate. It doesn't say that for 6 months he lost 35 pounds and accumulated $500 cash from visitors, specifically Ann Boone, or Carol Ann Boone. But it shows him doing that. It doesn't mention the weight or anything, but it does show him putting books in his bed to look like he's in it. Shimmies up. Instead of being an air duct, it looks more like attic space. And instead of crawling through to the guard's locker room, he seems to be in like the warden's quarters, because it looks like he comes out of a closet in a house. Instead of changing his entire clothes, he just puts on a jacket and leaves. Also, it doesn't mention the floor plan that he was able to get, so that he knew where to go. So the evidence, and then we just jump straight to Tallahassee, which he made. He was essentially out for about 2 months. He was finally arrested in February 12th, so all of January, and so about a month and a half. But it shows him at a nightclub, seeing these sorority girls, follows them back to their sorority house. It does show him, like in real life, picking up a chunk of wood, and it shows him going through the house, just bludgeoning them to death. Now, in real life, he bludgeons and strangles Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, and bludgeons Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner. She survived. And sexually assaulted Levy. And then he went 8 miles away to bludgeon Cheryl Thomas, but she also survived. This shows him bludgeoning the first one, bludgeoning and strangling the second one, then I think bludgeoning the third one. And then it says 2 lived, 1 survived, and it doesn't show him going to a second site. It doesn't show the sexual assault, but this is an impactful scene. Again, they haven't really shown him do anything. Attacks Carol DeRanch. We don't see him attack the woman at the resort, but we do see him carrying her outside. So when we finally see this, it's pretty effective. And it goes along with what the detectives are talking about. Because at this time, Keppel, the guy whose name I can never remember, from Utah, Mike Fletcher, I believe, from Colorado, or this other guy from Colorado, they're all teamed up now. They're all looking for Ted. It does mention that he is on the FBI top 10 most wanted list, which was true. But it also shows them, as they're talking about the FBI list, saying that, if the murders that he did while he was organized and planned, and he's been locked up for 2 years, he's going to be in a frenzy. He's a ticking time bomb. And we hear this before we see the Chi Omega attacks, so it makes it more effective. Now, it did show the sexual assault, which the bite marks on the ass cheek of Lisa Levy, those bite marks and him getting the indentation, that is pretty much what's going to solidify his guilt in court. So it doesn't show the assault. It doesn't show how they got his teeth, his teeth imprints or anything. But then we just see him sitting in front of an elementary school, watching girls play jump rope. Then we cut to black. Now, in real life, when he killed Kimberly Leach, it was February 9th of 78. And he took her from a junior high, not an elementary school. But it does show him in the white van in which he was in. Which, it does mention that she was found 7 weeks later during the Chi Omega trial. And then it shows him in another stolen car trying to flee when he sees a cop. Now, in real life, cop pulled him over after the chase. When he says he's under arrest, Bundy kicks his legs, runs. Cop tackles him, pistol whips him, tosses him around a bit, and then puts him under arrest. But Bundy will not give up his name. This is kind of similar, but Bundy gets more blows in on the cop, but the cop does get the upper hand, kind of beat the hell out of him. And then, this was near the Alabama state line, but I think it still says Tallahassee. But no date is given, and no date is given for the Chi Omega murders either. And then it just cuts to, or there's more stuff with the detectives. Excuse me, but it shows him, on trial, and after he's sentenced, it's almost verbatim when he says, I find it absurd to show mercy for something that I've never done, and now I will be tortured, and I will suffer for it. That's almost verbatim in that closing statement. And then what the judge says is almost verbatim to real life. But he doesn't say the whole extremely wicked, shockingly vile, and evil. He doesn't say how, you're a bright young man, you would have made a great lawyer. It would have been a pleasure to see you practice in front of me, but you went a different way, partner. He's more harsh, saying I sentence, you will stay in the Florida State Prison until the current runs through your body. It doesn't mention the plea deal he was given for just 75 years for the Chi Omega and Kimberly Leach murders. Kimberly Leach was the 12-year-old. But Bundy he couldn't go on TV in front of the world and say, I'm guilty. So he didn't see it as being saved from the death penalty. He saw it as admitting guilt. Which, after he was arrested in this, he mentions how he refers to himself in the third person, which he was known to do. But he says, you might be looking at 6 states when it was 7, and you might be looking at triple digits, which I don't think he ever admitted or said. If he did, it was in the late 80s, like mid to late 80s, when he was actually giving these confessions, trying to save himself. Yeah, it doesn't mention that. It ends with him calling Cass or Liz for the last time, saying, I'm not going to be able to call you anymore. She hangs up. And then voiceover says how on July 31st, 79, he was convicted of and sentenced to death for 2 counts of murder, 3 counts of second degree murder, and on February 12th, 1980, sentenced to death for Kimberly Leach, whom they called Lee Fletcher in this, which is all true, but in real life it was July 24th, 79, and February 10th of 1980. Then it just ends. It also mentions his denial of clemency and his appeals in 86. It just ends with a shot of him behind bars. And that's the movie. Yeah, 3-hour movie. There's a lot more to go over and say what they got right, what they got wrong. But it's a very well-made film. I might say Extremely Wicked might be a better quality film, but there are a lot of similarities between Harmon's performance and Efron's. But I think I did see more Bundy in Harmon than I did Efron. I mean, Efron seems more like he's doing an impression, where, I feel more. I felt more actual Bundy with Harmon. And again, it doesn't feel like a cheap TV movie. The 3 hours goes by very fast. I was really surprised at not only the amount of events and things they put in there, but how accurate they all were. Again, they might have tweaked them slightly. The name changes, that's going to happen. I'm not even concerned about that anymore. But the dates might have been off by a couple days, but it was still in the same ballpark. Save for maybe the first escape, which in real life was June. It was depicted in winter in this. But, if you want to see a movie about Ted Bundy or, the Ted Bundy story, it kind of equal between both Bundy and the detectives, even though at times it may focus more on the law enforcement side, especially in the first half. But you're not going to get more accurate than this. I mean, this really shows how to do an accurate serial killer film. And definitely one of the best that I've seen. And it makes me more excited to see the Brian Dennehy, John Wayne Gacy film, which did just come in. I now have that. And the 70s version of Helter Skelter, which was also a TV movie. So, I mean, I think people will like this one just because, it's more of a slasher film. You get to see him actually killing, which, again, that's all the face value true crime fans. Whereas the people that want the facts, they want the story, this is definitely going to mean more to them. And the first half may feel more like Extremely Wicked, not seeing him actually commit the crimes. But believe me, when it gets to the Chi Omega scene, you're going to know where that build-up is going, and it is well worth it. And, yeah, I was very impressed by this. I really don't think we need any more Bundy movies. Hell, there's a few more that I do need to get, but oddly enough, the first one ever made, and the only one made during his lifetime, so this is the only one that doesn't end with the visual of his execution or the ending text of his execution. This is the only one that doesn't have that. The first one ever made is actually the most faithful and probably the best one made. Again, Extremely Wicked might be a better quality film, but I really was impressed by this. So, The Deliberate Stranger, really can't beat this when it comes to a Ted Bundy movie. But that's another Bundy film. I got 1, 2, 3 more to get to. I do have the one with Cora Nemec on the way. I think that'll be in next week. Probably not going to review American Boogeyman because that's essentially a fictional story. But even aside from Bundy, I got a bunch more true crime film, serial killer films to get to. So stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.